to forget. Okay. Well, hello, everybody. I am so excited that every one of you is joining us for tonight's webinar in October. And I would like to present Vanessa Anderson Smith in our webinar. She is a TalkTools presenter and owns Anderson Smith Speech Therapy in Sioux Falls in South Dakota in the US. Her trainings include sensory integration, childhood apraxia of speech, reflex integration, orofacial myology, prompt bridging training, and the SOS approach to feeding. She has recently completed her coursework to become a certified orofacial myologist through the International Association of Orofacial Myology. And she holds a Bachelor of Arts from Augustana University and a Master of Arts from the University of South Dakota. So this is a lot, a lot of training. And also you're doing your doctor, right?
Yes. Yep. I'm getting
Yeah.
my doctorate right now.
Perfect. Perfect. So you will be talking about the oral placement therapy program tonight, which is probably pretty new for all of us, or at least some of us. So let's get it started.
Okay. Awesome. I am going to share my screen.
Mhm.
Let me make sure I share sound. All right. So we are going to do an introduction of oral placement therapy. We also call it OPT. We'll get into more of that later. And TalkTools is the company that our founder created, our founder who began oral placement therapy. This is the company where we sell. Now it's so much more than before. There's a lot of webinars. There's all the products that you need for speech and feeding therapy. And they've actually expanded to the point that I think there's over 100 webinars and courses right now available online. So just some copyright things here that you can read through. And then this is just about our images. So a little bit about me. Like Melanie said, I'm based in the United States in South Dakota, so I'm right in the middle. If you guys know Mount Rushmore, that's the state that I'm in. It's on the other side. I have a 6-year-old son and a 2-year-old son, and I very much stumbled into owning a practice, and I really, really credit being trained in oral placement therapy is what's gotten me here today. Uh, but when I first graduated, I was working in nursing homes. So I was working with the elderly, with post-stroke patients, dementia patients, but I always loved early intervention. So working with that birth to 3, 4, 5-year-old population. Um, Healthcare was changing drastically in the United States, and the company that I worked for just started cutting a lot of speech therapists, and they cut me from full-time to part-time. And I decided to take matters into my own hands, and I started to do a little bit of early intervention through our state educational association. I would travel into homes and do therapy with children in their homes with their parents. And then I decided, and it was a matter of 2 days that I quit my job and I went to go work in the schools just to kind of see if maybe this could take off and I could keep doing the Department of Education early intervention program. During that time, I had someone tell me about TalkTools and I looked it up and I saw that there was going to be a training about 4 hours away from me. So I signed up and I really had no clue what I was signing up for. Just people said it was really interesting and it was just light bulbs going off within the first 15 minutes. I realized this is why I didn't like articulation therapy before because just repeating words over and over, I knew that there was something more. And this gives you that foundation to better participate in traditional speech therapy. So I took that training and then I did the feeding therapy training with Lori Overland. And word started to get around that I was trained in TalkTools. And I didn't have an office or anything. I had people calling me from 2 hours away saying, I want you to see my kid. And I said, I don't even have an office or, do you want to come to my kitchen? And they said, of course. So I started seeing kids in my kitchen and my cat was walking around and these people, they did not mind at all because they were so thankful because they wanted someone trained in TalkTools because they had seen what it had done for other kids. So it just kind of snowballed from there. And now I have two clinic locations and I have about 23 staff members. I have probably 11 SLPs, and everybody is trained in TalkTools right away. They get 24 hours of continuing education right off the bat. It's the three-part to OPT and then the feeding course as well, because it's so foundational to what we do. If you work here, like this is just the lens that we operate through. And there is such a need in our area. There's plenty of speech therapists, but no one's doing this. And so we get the kids that, you know, we get all the hard kids here. We don't really have kids that come see us just because they can't say an R and their R sound and they're in and out in 4 months. Like we get the kids that have that every other therapy clinic hasn't worked for them. School isn't enough. So everyone here does that. And then I went into oral facial myology as well. So we do a lot of that as well. But TalkTools and oral placement therapy is absolutely foundational to do before you go into oral facial myology. Do you guys have a lot of oral facial myology going on over there? It's big in the US right now.
I would say so, but
Hmm.
there's our education is different. We are basically all SLPs, and then we decide to take courses about myofunctional therapy,
Yep.
but we don't have the certification process that you have.
Okay. Yeah, the fact that me becoming certified was so much easier because I had so much background in talk tools, and I realized I was kind of already doing oral facial myology. It's very similar goals. So, um, anyways, like I said, I mean, it has been just taking this course. I had no idea how it was gonna completely change my life, and then it's changed the lives of hundreds of others because we see about 400 sessions a week. And so all of those kids are getting these services and it's just absolutely been life changing. And it wasn't the plan, but it all snowballed. And here we are. I have a very supportive husband who he also works in healthcare, but he works in the finance side of it. So it's very helpful for me. But yeah, this is a picture of me at my grand opening of a clinic that we built during COVID, which was really fun. So we built a clinic with about 12 treatment rooms, and we're already out of space, actually. So we did buy extra land to add on if we need to. So let's talk about what is oral placement therapy. For a lot of children, the traditional speech therapy works. It's fine. They just need those visual cues. They need auditory cues so that look at me, listen to me, say it like me. Those kids, there's a lot of kids that they do great and they just need a little bit of reminders and they're in and out of therapy. But then there's other children who probably have sensory motor issues, could have Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, things like medical conditions. And that look at me, listen to me, say it like me does not work. And if you think about it, if you think about a physical therapist saying to a patient, look at me, listen to me, now walk like me. Like that doesn't work. You have to show them how to move their muscles. So it's almost like physical therapy for the mouth. And especially we think about the children with Down syndrome who are very low tone. They don't have that ability to move their muscles and they don't have the strength that typically developing kids do. And then we're asking them to to repeat words that they cannot do at all. They don't have that foundation to do so. And I look back at therapy that I did before I was trained in this, and I'm just thinking, of course that didn't work, Vanessa, because you need to work on 8 different things before you can even get them to imitate a word. So what TalkTools does too is it's very systematic analysis, and we break it down to the very first part and then build on it. So if I had a nonverbal kid, instead of going in and saying, okay, say more. And so this is sign language for more, American Sign Language. And just saying that over and over, they don't have the airflow control. They might not even know how to open their mouth on command. They, there's so many other things that we have to work on. And that has been such a game changer. And that's why these kids that have been to every other clinic in the area and they're coming into ours saying, great, here I go again. But we don't even work on speech right away. A lot of times we're working on all these foundational skills to get better speech. So this is not a standalone approach. This is being used in conjunction with traditional articulation and language services. And what I tell people a lot is that, if you participate in oral placement therapy or this oral motor therapy, this is a bridge to get you to go to traditional speech therapy. So we still do look at me, listen to me, say it like me, but only after we've given them the appropriate skills so that they can do that. Um, and what our therapy sessions look a lot like is we see kids for 30 minutes right now. We have private insurance and things like that in the United States um, that kind of they don't necessarily dictate how long we can see, but that's what like the increments that we do it in. And also uh, we have such a demand that we can see more kids in 30 minutes versus 45 minutes. But when I was first starting this, I was seeing kids for at least 45 minutes because I was working through all these new therapy techniques that took practice. But now it's just I've become a lot more efficient with it. So what it starts out like a lot of times is 75% is doing the different tools and exercises, and just 25% of a session is actual speech production. But as we progress, it's less with the tools and more with speech because we don't believe in doing these tools every day for the rest of your life. Again, it's a bridge to get them there to participate in traditional speech therapy better. This is a flow chart that was made, does your client need oral placement therapy? So if we look over here under no, can we identify that it's a speech sound disorder? Maybe it's just truly one articulation error, things like that, phonological based. No, that wouldn't need oral placement therapy. But if we look here, you start thinking, are there any sensory issues with this child? And at TalkTools, what we teach a lot of times is what you see in the body, you see in the mouth. So if I think about a child with Down syndrome that comes in, and this child has poor motor skills, gross motor skills, they have sensory issues throughout their body. Maybe they're really underreactive. We're going to see that in the mouth. So that was also something that I was never taught in school. Uh, so if there's a sensory deficit in the body, most likely there's going to be one in the mouth as well. So we do, and I'm going to show you guys videos at the end, but we do a sensory warm up with the Sensi, which is a vibrating tool, just to kind of wake those muscles up. We look at, is there a feeding deficit going on? And this doesn't just mean that maybe a child is on thickened liquids or tube feeding, but we really get into the nitty gritty. How many foods does your child have? Why is your child doesn't can't chew meat? Well, that's a problem. You can go your whole life and not chew meat. Obviously, that's fine, but there's a reason why a lot of times that they're not chewing meat. And it a lot of times is a muscle-based issue. So we really look at that, is there a good variety in their diet? Are they only eating a few different foods, or do they really shy away from certain textures and consistencies? So feeding is a big part of oral placement therapy. And then lastly, is there an oral motor deficit? So, can they mimic these oral motor movements? Do they have good jaw grading, or are they talking like this all the time? And why are they? Those are things that we're thinking about. Um, or are they the children that are just open and closed and they don't they they're kind of that all or nothing speech where it's either right here are right there, and there's no jaw movement in the middle, which we call dissociation. And I will tell you guys that in my clinic, there because people come to us for this kind of therapy, usually we're always doing, this, we're doing OPT with them. But I did have one child that came in, it was just the TH sound. So like the, and he couldn't do that. And we didn't need to use TalkTools. It was so crazy. It was just, he just really responded. He only needed the visual verbal cues. And it was really just a flip of what we normally see. But most of the kids that are coming to see us, they have oral motor and sensory deficits. So the goals of oral motor speech and feeding. Um, so Morris and Klein wrote a great book, The Pre-Feeding Skills, and Diane Barr is like one of the godmothers of oral motor feeding therapy. She's an incredible, has written books. So they talked a lot about we have to increase the differentiation of oral movements. So we have to differentiate the lips working from the jaw with the tongue. They do have to work together, but they have to move separately. So we look at two things that I had never heard of until I took a TalkTools course. But if you ask any PT or any OT, they know what these are. The first is dissociation. What that is, that's the separation of movement based on stability and adequate strength in one or more muscle groups. So what that would be like is so I have my water and it's on a table and I'm going to extend my arm and pull it in. So I have dissociated my arm from my core. If I didn't have good dissociation, what I would do is I would go all in, all out, like that. So that's dissociation. And then there's something called grading. And grading is the controlled segmentation of movement throughout space, which is based on dissociation. So dissociation is a lot of you need stability to be able to isolate movements. But grading, so if we're thinking about my cup again, so I'm going to use dissociation to get it. But what grading is I know exactly how far to put out my arm and to take it back in. So if I had poor grading and I go to reach for it, I could go forward and pull it in too much, and we don't have that fine grading. And that's what we see in speech. And once we improve dissociation and grading, we're going to improve feeding skills for nutritional intake and improve speech sound production so that we can maximize intelligibility. And I was gonna say, if anyone has questions as we go, just put them in the chat. I'm really casual and informal, or you could ask them with your camera on. That works too. So oral placement therapy was coined by Diane Barr and Sara Rosenfeld Johnson. So Sara started TalkTools. And Sara is an SLP and just such an innovator. These programs that she has come up with is absolutely incredible. It's like she has this engineering mindset, but a speech mindset. And then she was able to teach all of us about this. So, and Diane Barr, like I said, another just like godmother of the feeding and oral motor. So her and Sara got together and they said, we got to hammer this out. Oral placement therapy is not really like that oral motor therapy. But what is it? How can we explain that to people? So the number one, like a goal kind of definition is to facilitate speech movement with the assistance of a therapy tool, such as a bite block, which I'm going to pull my cart over. I've got all of my tools here. I can show you guys afterwards. A bite block, and then other tactile proprioceptive facilitation. So if anyone's like prompt trained, anything like that, using those cues. Secondly, we're going to facilitate speech movement. Then without the tool is what we're going to go to. And then we want to immediately transition that speech movement into something functional. People can give people can have a lot of opinions on using tools in therapy and using tools for feeding therapy as well. They say, why don't you should use food, you should use this. All the tools that we're using, it's just a bridge to get us through. We're not going to be using it for the rest of our lives. That's not the goal. Um, and with feeding therapy, we're going to talk a little bit later about, why I would never just start with food with a lot of kids, which is very probably controversial to some people, but I've seen this work time and time again. And some kids you can use food right away, but a lot of kids that I'm seeing, I can't even get in their mouth right away, much less you think they're going to put new food in their mouth. No, not going to happen. So, so we have oral placement therapy, but then the oral placement disorder is something that we talk about too. So children that have this, they could have typical or atypical oral structures. It's almost like, oral facial myofunctional disorders in a way. But so some of these kids, maybe they don't have a tongue tie or anything, but they aren't placing their articulators correctly. And the key to the definition of an oral placement disorder lies in the child's ability or inability to imitate auditory visual stimuli and to follow verbal oral placement instructions. So, this is another reason why so many SLPs will say we can't work on speech clarity until they're 5 because they can't follow directions. And I work on speech clarity with 2-year-olds all the time because I'm using oral placement therapy and I'm not really, if they can't, there's a reason why that maybe they're putting their tongue out for certain, like for the S sound. There's a reason why. And I'm going to get to the bottom of it with oral placement therapy, not with traditional therapy. I'm just, okay, pull your tongue back, there's a reason. So this is all about getting to that root cause so that we can give them foundational things. And then, the sky is the limit after that. So children with oral placement disorders, they can't imitate those targeted speech sounds using auditory and visual stimuli. And it was really interesting because I was, like I said before, when I took this course, I was working in a school district. I went from working with older people in nursing homes to working with children. And I had this girl, and her name was Megan, and she had Down syndrome. And I walk in, and the goals that the last speech therapist had were for the F and V sound. And I would remember going and getting a mirror. And I'm saying, okay, Megan, look in the mirror and let's say, ba, ba, ba. And she just looks in there. She's like, ba, 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 ba. And I was like, no, look at where you put this, ba, ba. And then I go to the TalkTools course and I'm thinking, yeah, she can't move. She can't retract her lower lip. She doesn't even know how to do that. She couldn't even do it if I said just bite your lower lip. How was she going to do that in speech? And I just felt awful that I didn't realize I was asking her to do something she truly could not do. She truly could not move her muscles that way. So I actually ended up, she was one of the very first patients that I started kind of dabbling in with oral placement therapy. And um, I did the straw kit with her, which we're going to go over later. And, I was new to it. I think this is going to work well for her, but let's try it. And some people would see me working with her with these crazy looking straws. And then about a month later, I had so many teachers coming up to me and saying, Vanessa, thank you so much. I don't know what you're doing with those crazy straws, but Megan isn't spitting on us anymore when she talks. And then, and to hear that was, while I was still learning was great validation because I wasn't even doing all of the things like the chewy tubes, the bite blocks. I was just only doing the straw kit because that's where my comfort level was. And just that alone was so life changing for the people in Megan's life and for Megan. So they can't follow those auditory visual instructions. They can't move their muscles that way. So we consider oral placement therapy to have 3 parts: speech, feeding, and then that oral motor, oral placement. And I can tell you in probably almost every single session that my therapists see, even if this child is not a picky eater, we could be working on some feeding goals with them because possibly are they thrusting their tongue when they swallow? If a child is coming to us and they say, oh, they have a lisp, and then I say, well, I want to see them swallow. And the parents look at me and I tell them like how we use our muscles to speak is very similar in how we use them to eat. And if they are going to be swallowing with their tongue pushing against the teeth or even coming out of the mouth versus elevating, then of course they're going to keep lisping with their S. So we have to fix that. If you swallow, I mean, the numbers are all over the board. Anywhere, like 2,000 times a day is kind of the average that I've read. If 2,000 times a day you are pushing and doing that motor pattern, and then in speech, we're trying to teach you to not do that in speech, like that, that doesn't make sense. Let's fix that problem of the swallowing, and that's going to help speech. That is actually what I am designing a study to do in my doctorate is to look at that oral phase of the swallow and speech development and see what is the relationship. And I doubt that it's a one-to-one relationship, but I feel like they're very much intertwined. And so that's why I'm going to be conducting a study here at my clinic doing that. There isn't a lot of research out there, but we see it all the time. So now's the time that we got to put our money where our mouth is, and we have to actually do the research. So oral placement therapy for speech and feeding. First of all, what we're going to do is we are going to create awareness. Let me get up. What am I? To the oral mechanism. So I talked about this Sensi. I'm sure, do you carry these? I'm sure, right? Yeah. Um, this is a Sensi, and we use this. I'm going to show you videos to increase awareness of that oral mechanism. And if you would do this on yourself, and if we ever get the opportunity to come and teach it, to teach this course, we bring the little, I don't know if I have any, but there's like sponges, like there's a stick with a sponge on it that you can use an oral swab. You can do that, but it really does. It teaches. Oh, I think, do you have one? Melanie's gonna dig. Or you can use this, but basically those children that are underreactive and we need to increase the response. Yes, those. What do you guys call those?
Mundschwämme.
Oh, okay. I'm not going to try and say it, but that's even those, what those do. You don't have to, this is amazing. Everyone has these at my clinic. They're amazing. But even on yourself, if you just grab one of those and you do it in a systematic way, you really do, you feel a lot more. So we're kind of waking up the mouth so that you can feel and you have that sensory feedback. A lot of these kids that are coming to us, I say that they have Novocaine mouth. So Novocaine in the States is what we use. It's an anesthetic. And when you go to the dentist, if you're getting work done, that's a numbing quality. So these kids, they walk around all day and they have very limited, they're just not feeling what we typically feel. And you think about it, speech is hard, swallowing's hard, you're maybe biting your tongue. Kids walk around like that all day. On the other end of the spectrum, some kids are hyper reactive. And those are the kids that I say, oh, they're going to be a wine connoisseur someday because they are so sensitive to taste and they're so sensitive to texture and anything like that. And, we see kids all over the board with those things. So we just need to increase, usually it's increasing the awareness of that oral mechanism and normalizing that oral tactile sensitivity. There are children that are very, even though they can be under responsive, they can be very defensive. Um, and they don't want you in their mouth. And I work with a lot of kids that have medical trauma as well, and our babies that were in the hospital in the neonatal intensive care unit because they were born really early. They've been intubated with tubes in their mouth and all these things. So there are times that I can't even look at a child during an evaluation pretty much without them just losing their minds. And I have had to work. I had one patient who had a cleft lip and palate. And so we're talking a lot of surgeries, a lot of therapies that weren't working for him till he came to see us. I could not get into his mouth for 2 months, at least 2 months in therapy, and we were seeing him 3 times a week. So we just kept working on desensitizing, and he was, and I have family say, "Well, I don't think my kid's going to let you do that." And then I said, "Don't worry, we'll get there eventually." I've never not been able to get into a child's mouth. But a big thing of what we do at TalkTools is we teach you how to work through that because you can't just go up to a kid and just start doing that. You got to establish rapport. You got to kind of work your way into it. So it's a really enjoyable experience for them, or as enjoyable as it can be, because it's still work. We're also going to improve the precision of those volitional movements of the oral structures for speech production. So, we're talking millimeters of the tongue tip moving, and you're going to have a speech error. So we have to really work on preciseness as well. And we're going to differentiate those oral movements. So the dissociation and the grading. And then another term that we haven't talked about yet is fixing. So that's an abnormal posture used to compensate when we don't have stability. In speech, how we see fixing a lot is you talk like this and or clenching because they're overworking. They're trying to provide jaw stability. And the only way they can do that is if they're almost biting down together. So that would be considered fixing. Number 5, we're going to, the goal is to improve feeding skills and nutritional intake. And then look at all the things that we're doing before we get even to speech intelligibility. We're doing all of those things before. There's so much more that goes into speech production that I know I wasn't taught in graduate school, that you can't always jump right into speech. You have to look at airflow. You have to look at, can they even feel in their mouth that well? All these different things. So this is just like, it's when I first took it, it was completely mind blowing. And I thought, yeah, this is exactly why I didn't like articulation therapy before. I always loved feeding therapy, but I didn't like articulation. And now I just love it because I have the tools to make children successful now. And what we do at TalkTools a lot is it's all about the jaw. And that was a hard concept for me to kind of go with because we just think about the tongue so much for speech clarity. But if you don't have good foundation in your jaw, it's just not, it's going to be so much harder. So right now in America, it's football season, which so like not soccer, but we call it football. It's all opposite. So we think about cheerleaders, okay? Cheerleaders at a football game. And the ones at the base here are holding steady. They're the ones holding steady. So that's like the jaw. And then the one at the top that's doing the flips, that cheerleader that's doing the flips at the top, that is the tongue. And so if you think about cheerleaders and they're not able to hold people up and they're wiggling, that one at the top will never be able to do the flips. Okay. So we always have to start with the jaw. And that's what we look at first. And then we work at lip or jaw lip dissociation. Let's talk about how babies babble. All right. Babies babble, ba, 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 ma, ma, ma. They have no dissociation between their lips and their jaw. But when we get to say ooh, wah, we have to move this separately from our jaw, yet in sync. Okay. So this is lip dissociation is ooh, wah. Then we work on tongue dissociation. And this is where we get a lot of the speech clarity, but not if that jaw is sliding all over the place. So jaw sliding, jaw jutting, that shows us it's not stable and that we need to work on stability. So I took my first TalkTools course with Monica Purdy, and it's crazy because Monica and I, we've written courses together now, and I never would have ever thought that TalkTools would keep, leading me here and talking to you guys in Austria. It's just amazing. But I remember looking back and I had someone with a lisp, and I thought, okay, so I have to work on the tongue. I have to work on the tongue. It still hadn't sunk in yet about the jaw. So I emailed Monica and I said, I have a child with a lisp, so I'm going to do the straws. She said, yeah, do the straws, but are you doing something with the jaw? And I said, no. And she said, well, you have to do the jaw first, remember? And it was a whole other train of thought. So I had this boy. He was in fifth grade here, so he was 10. He had a lisp. So he was putting his S's and Z's, was sticking his tongue out for it. Smart, smart kid, worked so hard, could not carry it over. And he was in speech for years. And then by March of that year, I said, Lucas, I know this is weird, but we're going to start doing chewy tubes. And I got out the red and the yellow chewy tubes. And he was rolling his eyes. He's like, you're crazy. You're crazy. I'm like, I know I'm crazy. You aren't telling me anything new. Okay. But we're just going to try it because nothing else is working. So I started doing these in March. By the end of the school year in May, he had met almost all of his goals that he had been working on for years in traditional speech therapy. And he graduated the following fall. So it just like, there's those cases that you always remember where you think, okay, I know I was taught this, but now I saw it work. And I know how many more kids need my help out there. Jaw dissociation. So again, we're looking at dissociating. So we want the jaw to move on its own. And you think about babies. So I wonder, do I have my baby in here? Hold on, I might have a baby. Here. Again, we're always going back to typical, to that very first step. And you think about typical development, and you've got a little baby here. And the baby, we have a brand new baby, and they move their eyes around. You see them, but then they get older and they start to move their head around. Okay. And they move their head around and they're keeping stable in there. But then it doesn't stop. And we have to start dissociating the jaw from the head. And that's when we see ba 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 ma ma ma, and we start to see opening for a spoon to come to the mouth, even opening for that reflexive opening for to take the breast or the bottle to feed. So you think about all that dissociation. It's absolutely incredible. Any of us talk clearly when you think about everything that needs to happen to speak clearly. So then we work on the lips, dissociating the lips. And again, think about typical development. Lip closure develops first for spoon feeding with babies with purees. And then how this ties into speech is, so say I'm doing spoon feeding, that open close, that's that same motor pattern we need for M, P, and B, which is the first developing in our language. And the D sound. You hear a lot of the da 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 from babies, but a lot of the times in English, the sounds that we're working on first are mama, more, baba from maybe bottle or baby, things like that. So it's very much tied, and that's why I'm designing a research study to further figure out how linked they are together, and because they track together. So speech and feeding really track together. Then we work on lip protrusion. So rounding, ooh, wah, and then retraction. And we need lip protrusion and rounding for straw drinking. And I have a video later on, but at TalkTools, we love our honey bear. He's like our little mascot. And you need that. And then you need for the cup, this is the cup that we teach little kids for. So you need retraction to drink from a cup, very much intertwined. And then lastly, then we get that lower lip protrusion and retraction. That's like what I was working on with Megan, that girl with Down syndrome, where I was saying ba, 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 and she was saying ba, ba, ba. She didn't have that lower lip retraction. When we dissociate the lips from the jaw, we focus on, how does the movement work? So first of all, it's open to close, open to close. So we're opening and closing our lips. Then we work on the protrusion, retraction, And then that last part that you need for these speech sounds is the lower lip retraction, protrusion, and tension. It's just it makes it so much easier that TalkTools systematically breaks all these things down and then you build back on them. So then we're going to dissociate our tongue from the jaw. So now we need our tongue to work separately from the jaw. I'm not going to go into all this because it's kind of a lot right now, but that's what we need for co-articulation. So to get all those speech sounds together clearly. Double slide there. And like I said, it's absolutely amazing when you really think about it, what we need for speech clarity. And we're going to talk about this in a little bit, the abdomen, what we need for inspiration. We got to be able to push the air up. I completely disregarded that for years until I was taught. But all of these things, all of these structures need to work together, yet separately for clarity. We do a lot of feeding as a part of OPT. And they're, like I said, they're intertwined. I'm working on the research to prove it. And how I see it all the time, these kids that come in for speech therapy, and I start asking about feeding, and oh, well, they only eat soft foods. Oh, they can't chew meat. Oh, they can't. And it happens so often. Um, but it's also important that we're going beyond safe and nutritive feeding. Safe and nutritive feeding, of course, that's what we need. But I want to look at what's going on in that oral phase of the swallow. Do they have really refined oral motor movements, or are they eating like this? Before I was trained in this, I thought that was not having great social skills and no awareness. That's not what it is for a lot of our kids at all. That's a muscle. Like their muscles are not refined and that motor pattern isn't refined. And you think about that tongue thrust with the swallow. And how is that going to have implications with, it can push teeth forward, you have open bites. It's really hard on that TMJ, that temporomandibular joint, when you're pushing the tongue against the teeth. It creates a lot of down the road issues for people. So I just want to look at how refined are they? Like, is their tongue moving laterally, chewing with your lips closed? Like I said, I always thought that that was a social etiquette thing. And really, knowing what I know now, it's a muscle motor movement. And it's the fact that you can keep your lips together and chew and move your tongue, and you're not doing it all together at once. So let's just talk a little bit about treatment, things that we do, and the TalkTools hierarchies. This is the straw hierarchy. And it starts with our duck straw. And as it goes up, they get a little bit longer, and so this is number 5, but it's just very small increments. And what it does is it makes you have more tongue-based retraction and more lip rounding, and they just get harder, a little bit harder as they go, a little more resistance. And the goal is you want a child to have a good swallow. You want to have 4 ounces in 2 minutes or less with the lips protruded like that, tongue retracted, and then you can keep moving on through the straws. But the thing with TalkTools is it's always the slower the better. And I would want to jump the gun and I'd dabble around and then I'd move ahead too quick and I always had to go back. So we are in it for the long game. This is going to take a while, but this is what is going to get the results that we want instead of just slapping a band-aid on some of these speech and feeding issues. There's the bubble hierarchy. I don't know if I have bubbles in here. I think my bubbles always go missing. But anyways, you think about, why do we need a bubble hierarchy? The very first thing that we have to do to speak is use our breath. And so a lot of the children that come in that are nonverbal, we're doing the bubble hierarchy and the horn hierarchy. They don't even understand how to push air up. They can't even imitate ah. So we're working on, and then we're going to keep molding that in. This is the horn hierarchy, and it starts really easy. You barely have to blow. The goal is we do 25 times in a row. Then you get up to number 9, this party one. Hey guys, I hope it's not too loud. It is really, it's hard for me. So you think about our patients that have low tone and poor lung capacity, like in Down syndrome. This is huge for kids with Down syndrome because their lung capacity isn't great and their lower tone. And then this just like kind of grows that lung capacity. And a lot of children with Down syndrome have poor volume. And what research shows is that even if they do have articulation errors, if they speak louder, it improves intelligibility so much. So with our patients with Down syndrome, or my patients that spent a long time being intubated, or my patients that had trachs, we're really working on this a lot because it's that first step that you need. But it's really cool. It works on tongue retraction. You need tongue retraction for every single sound in English, except for TH, like the. So we need to have tongue retraction, and it's working on lip closure. Okay, this is what it makes TalkTools so important, oral placement therapy so important is, like I said, it's always about the jaw. So we know that we need jaw stability, and if they don't have it, how are we going to get it? Well, we have the chewy tube hierarchy that Sara Rosenfeld Johnson came up with. You start with either red or yellow. And now that's because some kids, like really younger kids, will start with yellow because if you can see, it's smaller. It's a little bit more resistance. So we kind of play around, we alternate it. So, but say I have a 9-year-old kid coming in, I'm going to start with this one. But red and yellow can be kind of intertwined, just depending on the size of the mouth and the jaw height. But then you keep going up to purple and then you end with green, and it gets harder as you go. And there's all these different, it's like you have to do 10 bites, 10 bites like that. And that's the goal. What we see with kids is if they start sliding, it's because their jaw isn't stable. So this is how we work on it. We also work on it with the bite blocks. I took mine off the ring. But this is the ultimate for jaw strength and stability and dissociation. And there's a whole program with it that I don't know. I think I spend an hour on it or close to an hour when I teach it in the 3-part class. So this is all great. These hierarchies are amazing, but we cannot forget this is not a cookbook approach. You're still a therapist, you're a skilled therapist, and you need to know when to pull certain programs. There are not every kid that comes in gets every single hierarchy that TalkTools has because they might not need it. And so you just got to pick and choose. And then sometimes maybe you don't have time to target all of it. What I usually say is if you have limited time, I mean, you're always going to target the jaw with chewy tubes and bite blocks, and the straws are awesome for just getting that tongue retraction and building the strength up in that tongue. But yeah, not every kid needs everything, and you have to be able to pull from it. And if you take the 3-part to OPT course, that's where you really get into that nitty gritty of it. And we create in the 3-part course, we start everywhere from, again, seating was something I, again, never ever thought of. Talking about like the seating protocol and how they should sit, working with sensory, working with feeding. Then we do our OPT exercises and then we start to work on speech. There's all these things that so many kids need before. Yet I think about 23-year-old Vanessa who jumped right into speech, meaning very well, but guess what gets way better results is doing all of this before. Now I have some videos for you guys. I just wanted to show you. I think it's so helpful because when I was first learning about this, I thought, how do we even implement this? How do you start? Do I have to start everything right away? And no, you just, once you take the 3-part to OPT, then it's just start dabbling, start using just one thing that you're comfortable with and then build on it. So this is my buddy Renner. This was actually, I need to update this video because this is a old tool. I always use the Sensi now. But what I was doing is I'm increasing sensory awareness for Renner. Renner has Down syndrome, and he was born early and was had also born with something called hydrops. He was filled with fluid. Um, he was very, very sick. And so, but now he's just like thriving and doing amazing. But we had a lot to work on because he was intubated for so long and couldn't eat and was just laying there. So in the NICU. So right now, and he's a petite little guy. He is probably at least 3 here. And this is just the thing that we would do to warm up his mouth.
One.
So doing the C stretch. And look at how his tongue follows it. So good. That's what we want the tongue to do.
Can you do kiss?
So cute. And that's just one of the little warm-ups that we do. This is, I think this is a spoon feeding one. Yeah, of my buddy Warrior is his name. He also has Down syndrome and he has a really big tongue thrust. So we were working on spoon feeding because spoon feeding helps with tongue retraction because your tongue pulls back. So this is just one of the therapeutic activities we do. And we talk a lot in the course about giving jaw support,
Let's use only our
how
lips.
important that is. Because when we support the jaw, then the tongue can work better. So I start by giving him jaw support, and you're going to see in this video in a little bit, I'm not going to give it so that you can see the difference.
Should we go in and out now? Okay, I'll bring it to you. I'll do the work. I'll help you. There. Nice job with that lip. Look, there's a little more on it. Let's get it all off. There's some bumps in there. Nice job. Oh, do you want more? Yeah. Okay.
So there, and you can see the tongue comes out a lot more because I wasn't giving support.
Nice.
Then it's so much better then. And again, we're not gonna give so he doesn't need to do that for the rest of his life, but until we can get the jaw where we want it to be, when we're doing a therapeutic exercise like this, we're gonna give jaw support. He's so cute. This is my son Brooks when he was about 6 months old. People don't realize that you can really start teaching straw drinking very young, especially with the honey bear. And with him too, we were doing cup drinking. You can start at 4 months old. Even in the NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit, there are some babies that they just do little medicine cups and you kind of put it in their mouth and they lap it up a little bit. But you can start these things a lot earlier than what we used to think that you could. So this is the very first time Brooks was 6 months old. And so with my older son, it took him a long time to figure out straw drinking. He had a posterior tongue tie. And he was awful at bottling and just his oral motor movements were not great. But Brooks had a to the tip tongue tie. It was just crazy. And he ate better than my other son ever did. And I didn't think that he was going to pick up on it that quick just because my other son didn't. But this was the first time we did it. He was about 6 months old. And there's just no other way to teach any child how to drink from a straw than with this. This makes it so easy. So what you do is we work on squeezing it. You're going to see here what I've done with Brooks is I put it in the side of the cheek to try and get that negative pressure. And then I moved it to the middle. You'll probably hear my other son in the background. So he's doing it there on the side. Brooks. Brooksy. Put in the middle. There. And what's nice about this is you just squeeze it a little bit to get them to put some up in their mouth, and then they start to swallow, and then they figure out how to draw it up, and it's you can just see the lights go off for them when they do that, and they kind of think, what did I just do? Um, okay, this is a speech session. This is kind of a typical early intervention speech session that we do using, they're called the Apraxia Shapes Kit. Here it is. Which we teach in the three-part OPT, and Renee Roy Hill, she created these, and they are amazing for giving tactile cues. And we're working on bubbles with Miss Violet. Violet is about 3 and has a diagnosis of Down syndrome. But regardless of the diagnosis,
More
you can use
bubbles.
this with any child.
Oh. Oh. Good job. Oh. Good work, Violet. More bubbles. Yeah, bubble. 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 There. Look. More bubbles. Okay. Oh. Oh. You say bye-bye?
So that's Violet. So that's all that I have. And it just kind of like in conclusion, this is me and my son Drake at my clinic. Like I said, he had a posterior tongue tie, poor bottler, couldn't breastfeed, all these things. And so we are in speech therapy today here at my clinic. He was getting it twice a week for articulation. And then now he's down to once a week, but he loves to come to the clinic. And if he fires you, that means you're one of his favorites. So he's just always hanging around. Um, Oral placement therapy, this is a great addition to traditional speech therapy. And it's really important to remember that there's so much that goes into OPT. There's no way we could cover all of it, just in this. This was just to give you some ideas. We really encourage you to take the three-part to OPT training to really dive into the theory of it, because you want to know why you're doing all of that. And when you want to get the results that we get here at my clinic, it's because all of my therapists, they go through they spend 12, I think it's 12 hours in this training, and because you want to do it the right way. If you're not doing it the right way, sometimes you don't even know that you're ingraining poor motor patterns, and you can make it worse. So the course is it's just amazing, and it really just pulls everything together. I think, Melanie, are you taking it now?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Is
Do you
it?
like it?
I do. I do. It's awesome. I've heard of teaching the jaw skills before, and I remember going my light bulbs off, and I saw that in therapy as well. And yeah, it's awesome. So I'm always telling my colleagues, well, you got to work on the jaw, do some
Yes.
biting, chewing skills, and you will see already improvements.
Yeah, it's crazy how quick it can come. These kids, they just change so quick, and they pick up on it really
They do.
fast.
They do. It is. So thank you, Vanessa, for your great
Yes, thank you so
answer.
much for having me. Does anyone have questions or anything?
I don't see any
Okay.
questions in the chat.
I can put my email address in the chat too
Mhm.
if anyone
Mhm.
has questions.
Mhm.
And also I'm on Facebook and Instagram. I'm not as active as Melanie is. She's like the pro on Instagram, but on Instagram I'm VASSLP. And then you can just search my name on Facebook, and I love to connect with people that way too. or, ask Melanie. Melanie can, refer questions on too. So
Sure.
yeah,
Sure. Some of them I probably can answer, but I'm sure not all of them. So
yeah,
I will forward them to you.
sounds good.
Perfect. So if
Awesome.
there's no questions, I think you did a great job. So maybe
Thank
that's
you.
why there's no questions.
Thank you. Well, everyone have a good night. And
Thank you. You enjoy
yeah,
lunch.
all right, will do. You guys
All
have a great
right.
day. Bye.
Bye. Bye. So thanks everyone for joining us, and I see you soon. Bye.